Morning everybody. Almost give myself a fright then when it popped up. Anyway, good morning everybody, and May the 4th be with you in the US. 4th of May. Anyway, enough of that. Our boxes, we're getting really close to the end of the boxes. We're at a point where most of the work done is about the handle. Now, over the last week, or actually over the last 3 weeks, I've tried to nut out how to put together the handles for these Japanese style boxes. Now, the first thing I did was I went and did a little bit of research and worked out exactly what all that meant. Now, this is what I've come up with. Now, this is just very, very simple. It's nothing fancy. All I've done is drawn up a little diagram. The torii gate is the style that the handle we're sort of going to be using. And what the torii gate is, it's basically a gate to a shrine, or to most of the Japanese shrines, right? It's a transition from the worldly to the spiritual. That's the significance of the gate. Now, the gate's made up of a number of different bits. Now, we can't use all the bits because, well, we're not making a full-size gate. We're just making a handle for the top of a box. So, as you can see, the parts on the things, we're going to be using the columns, and traditionally the columns, and this is only from my research, so it may differ from other people's opinions or research or knowledge, but this is what I've come up with so far. And the columns are generally round. They've got a little platform on the top where the shimagi actually sits on, or actually it's mounted on, and then the kasagi sits on the top of it. The kasagi is the bit that has the shape. The top edge of the shimagi has the shape, but the bottom is generally flat where it sits on the top. And of course the nuki is the support for the columns. Okay, so generally that's my understanding of what the torii gate is all about, and we're just going to sort of try and emulate a little bit of that sort of design in our handle. Now, it's taking me, actually I'll set that up there so you can see it. We're not going to be using the jig today. I spent a fair bit of time mucking around building something that looks a bit like this. Now, all it involved was 2 of the columns and the kasagi, which is the bit on the top. Didn't put any of the rest of it on, and there's enough room there to be able to get your hand on and actually lift that off. Only building the columns and setting it up so that it looks a little bit, or looks a little bit like the gate is quite difficult, because I wasn't sure whether to sit that on top of the post or to have it resting in it, and resting in it seems to be the best way around it, what I've got. So just building that and getting it like that took a fair bit of effort. Now you'll have to remember, I don't have a table saw. I could have cut the tops of those with the table saw, but I don't have one, so I had to sort of work out some way of actually building this rebate in here. Now I've cut that with a saw. Of course I've used a Japanese saw, and then I've cut the rest of it out on the bandsaw. But the problem with that is that all the internal parts of it all are really, really rough.
Hold it still.
And it meant I have to work hard with a chisel, a sharp chisel, to actually get it right. Now that's okay, I can do that, but for the show it's very, very difficult to actually get that and have the time to actually put the whole lot together. So I've come up with some different ways of doing things, and these are my ways of doing things. I don't know if you're able to do things this way, but give it a shot anyway. But before we do that, just want to show you the inside of this box. So we're going to get on with that in a second. This is where we're up to with this larger version of the box. This is the one that has the 3 layers. In the top layer, I think you saw me build this componentry for the inside of the box. One of the things that I found with the box is that because of the way I did it, everything is relatively heavy. Now sometimes that's not such a bad thing, but it's relatively heavy, basically because I've got a piece of 10mm material in the bottom that had to have part of it exposed, so it sits in the recess of that of the bottom tray. So that became very heavy, so I had to modify that, and in my other boxes I've made that a piece of 8mm, and I've just adjusted where I put the trench. Now in the bottom of this one we're going to have a couple of little trays, little boxes. So these are going to be, and this is where we've used the technique that I used for doing my trinket boxes, and I'm going to put a lid on it that hinges, or a pinned hinge lid. So that's what's going to happen with that, and it's going to have a lid that's very similar to the way I've got this little box made. So it's pinned and it will just lift up like so. So technique to build that was the same as the technique I used to build this little box, and it'll have the same sort of lid. Won't have the catch on the top here. I'll have something else different in there. Now I'm going to do that off camera. It takes a lot of thinking out how to get that to work properly so that I can actually get it to open while it's still in the box. That's going to take me a little bit of time to figure that one out. But once I get it done, I'll show you what it looks like once I've got it done. But that's the technique, or that's the idea behind that one. So that's where I'm up to with this box. And as you can see, it's turning into quite a nice little box. And it's got this lovely piece of rose mahogany on the top of it. And I will have this style of handle on the top of it. Now, this handle is 14mm. It's too chunky for this box. It's just too heavy looking. So you know, we talk about design, we talk about proportion a lot, and that's way out of proportion for that little box. So therefore what we have to do is make a smaller one. That brings up all the problems that we're going to face today in making a smaller one. So what I've done is I've cut out a little plywood shape of it, and then from that plywood shape I made a little plastic template. That plastic template is quite useful for this process because we're going to use the router to actually shape the whole thing. So let's see how we go with it. So if I put this over here and get this one over here. The material that I'm using for it is a piece of 12mm silver ash. Now the silver ash matches up to the other parts of the box, so what I need to do is just cut myself a piece of material, cut out the shape of it, and then shape it on the router. So first thing I want to do is just get myself a shape, or get myself a piece of material. So there's my bottom. It's given me a little bit of movement. I can trace around my template, and I know exactly where I've got to cut. So let me cut a piece of this off. So over to the drop saw. Again, safety is an issue that we need to be dealing with all of the time, so I try to sort of make sure that we have that aspect of our game all covered. Okay, ears on everybody. Okay, so now what I need to do is stick that on there, and then I'm going to cut it out on the bandsaw. So a little bit of double-sided tape. If you remember rightly, this stuff was in some of my past videos, you'll see I use this stuff, and it's really a little awkward to use.
It's effective,
to
but
cut it up, but it does the job. So close to the end. One in the middle. Now remember, the reason I use this stuff is because it's quite thick and it gives me a little bit of free space between the template and the bearing on the router bit. There's probably 100 different ways of cutting that stuff off, but for this exercise that was adequate. Now, probably could have had this done before the show too, but just show you how we went through the process. Just peel off the backing. Don't want it to stick to the table. Okay, now when we put that down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it very close to the bottom and close to one end, so I'm only cutting small amounts of material off. Stick that down. Okay, so now all I need to do is trim up my edges, take out that bit there, a little bit off the end of here, and then I can use the router. And when you look at here, you can see, don't know if you can see that on the camera, but there's a gap underneath there. That little bit of space is quite important when you're using a flush trim router bit. So, over to the bandsaw. So what I want to do here is I just want to take out as much as I can. chainsaw back. That's all we need for it. Now, as you can see, it's quite rough. So I'm going to trim that up with a flush trim router. Now this is quite a difficult task because you've got grain direction interfering with everything that you do on the piece. So it's important to make sure that you've got tools that will actually do the job for you. I've cut out as much as possible off the piece itself, and the router bit that I'm using, a T821DB, now double bearing. You can see I've got bearing at the top of the cutter and at the bottom of the cutter. Okay, so straight cut. So it's got a little bit of an angle on it, but not much, but it will cut quite nicely. So we're going to use the top and the bottom of the router bit. So I'll show you how that works. Now I've had a bit of a play with this, and I've had a piece of timber spit off it and head across the room in a hurry, and I'd rather that didn't happen. So I've worked out a couple of different techniques to use this router bit so that it's quite safe.
I've never seen you use this one before.
So here's a new bit for Pammy. So what's happening, the router bit's spinning in that direction. So what we want to be doing is pulling off that router bit so that if it does end up spinning off, it will take off across the room and it won't kick back towards yourself. So adjust your height. If we're using this one here, grain direction is significant when you come to adjusting this. Come down, so I'm just a tiny little bit above the piece of timber. So now what's going to happen here is I have to go this way on here. I can't do that on this end because that's spinning this way. It's not going to work very well for me. So sorry, I have to do that on this end, so I'm coming off here because the grain direction is this way, and I have to go around here. Like I said, I cannot do it that way because it's going to catch on the pointy end. So what I need to do is I need to turn it over and work it that way, which means I've got to use the bottom of the router bit, so the bottom bearing. So it's going to play into everything we do. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work it all through here, 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 and then I'll come back and I'll go from the center and I'll come out here and do this side of it, and then I have to turn it over and do the other parts from the bottom. Okay, so let me get a pair of earmuffs. Keep forgetting that I need these every time I start up here. So we want to go this way. So ears on, everybody. so what I've done there, you can see I've got really nice clean surface on here. Still a bit rough there, but I don't want to go down the hill here. I want to have to go back up the hill. So same on the bottom, and I need to cut around there. Now I had to cut around the corner, which is what I've done there. So that's the same process that I have to do on this side, and I can't do it from the point. You'll also notice that I do a little bit at a time. I didn't try to take the whole lot off at once, just a little bit at a time. So readjusting is just a matter of now raising my router bit up. Just going to come up a tiny bit more. There we go. And we can repeat the process. And there's our Kasagi. So let me get that router bit out of there. Now we don't sell this router bit. You'll need to go to Carby Tool to get it, or a store that carries Carby Tool bits. I think Jimmy Carroll has Carby Tool bits.
Can you put the packet back on the table, please, Col?
Now while Pammy's showing you that, I'll dismantle our router bit. So I can actually put a ruler underneath and use the ruler to remove the sticky stuff. I don't know if you call this traditional woodworking, but I have a result. And so we finish up with that really nice shaped Kasagi. And it's the same shape as my little template. So I'll just keep that template so the next time I want to do one of those. Now if you need a shorter one, what you would do is you would do one end and then shift your piece along, reset it, cut the bit off, and then reshape the end of it, and that would give you a shorter one, of course.
Clever.
So depends on what you want. This one here is actually going to go for us. Now we need to build the hashira, which are the two posts. Now these were the really difficult bits. This is that was fairly easy, simple stuff that I managed to be able to work out fairly quickly. The next bit is quite difficult because we just pan across to the camera here. This platform is generally where the shimagi sits on. Now what we're doing is we're bringing those little platform bits up halfway through the Kasagi, Okay, just a little bit of design license.
Yeah, design license.
Design license, just to give it a little bit of a nice look. And this is what it looks like when you get it right, or when you get it done. You can see I've got the top of the columns halfway up the middle of the Kasagi, and that looks quite nice. What the difficulty was making sure that the space under here matched up to everything else. Now this is just a piece of rough cedar that I've attached that to. It's going to sit on top of this lid eventually. So you can imagine that disappeared, and that will sit eventually screwed onto the lid. So that's basically what it looks like, and it's designed to pick it up. So you've got something to get your fingers under when you pick it up. Okay. So making the columns was difficult. So off to the lathe, and I'll show you how I went about that. Get rid of that. So we'll just go over to the lathe. Now this is going to be something new for Pammy to do, having a little play on the lathe.
We've done the lathe work
We've
before.
done lathe work before. So sometimes trial and error is something that you have to go through, and you can see I've got a whole lot of them, and I've just been going through process after process, and that to me is what woodwork's all about, is coming up with a solution to an issue that might you know, add some sort of contrast to your work. So that's what we've been doing, and that's what over the last 2 or 3 weeks, as I said, I've been mucking around trying to get it right. So this is a piece of rose mahogany, and this is how we went about it. So I started there are lots of different traditional turning techniques that are used in building something like this, but I've sort of stepped away from that a little bit as well. All I need to make sure is that's in the middle. That's pretty good. So I don't need that anymore. So I'm going to put that out of the way. What do I do with that spanner? Just knock it up nice and tight. Okay, so it's not too bad. So the first thing I had to do was get myself a size. Now, need a little ruler. I could probably use a LARK tool for this. The spigot on the end of it, you can see it's got a hole in it. I'll tell you why that in a minute. Spigot in the hole only has to be about 5 or 6 mil, basically because of the thickness of the material. The distance from the shoulder of the top of the post to the bottom there was 16 millimeters, and that would have given me about a 9 or 10 millimeter space, and you can imagine the bottom of the Kasagi sits there, and then the bottom of the box, or the top of the box, sits there. So you've got 10 millimeter space underneath, and remember the Kasagi is shaped. So we had to do that, and then we've got the bit on the top of it, so I just made that 10 mil. So the distance between the top of the piece to the bottom of the piece was 26 millimeters. So I had to mark that out first, and then I'll mark the 5 first, and then from that mark my 26 mil. So tool rest. I only had to use a little tool rest for this. Didn't have to use a big one. just going to face off the end of that first. I'm just going to use parting tool to do that because it doesn't have to be perfect. Got the tool rest a little bit too high, but that doesn't matter. Okay, so that's basically gives me my mark. Now I just need to put some measurements on there. What I do with that ruler, there it is. So my little step is 5mm. And then from that mark I needed 26mm. $10mm for the step. Amy's creeping around behind me. And my 5mm. Okay, so now it's just a matter of shaping that. Now, when I shaped it, originally I used my skew chisel. And I thought I have to use a parting tool, I need to use a spindle gouge, or like I do the whole lot with the skew. So it's just a matter of, first of all, marking the areas. I'm going to have fun with that, then you've got to come back around the other side. So we're working on this side of it. So this is my step. So I've just got to get that down to, I've got my measurements already on my gauges. $10mm. And now to do the rest of it. So the centre of this part here, I have a gauge set to that diameter. I also have a gauge set to that diameter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the large one first. So this set of tools will give me that distance there. So what I have to do is set that there. Gauge is still not quite right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn down on the end of it where it's going to be a bit smaller anyway. spot on. So I'll turn the whole thing down to that size. So that's my complete length. What I need to do now is I might just take off a bit more. Give me an end to the project. Now I need to turn this down to that diameter. So again, back with the parting tool. I'll measure up my 5mm. Sorry, 10mm.
You can go shallower if you like.
There's a reason I've got it that diameter.
Okay.
Now, fit your measurements according to what you're building. This is for this particular process. All I'm doing is going through a process here. Check the diameter. A bit more. A bit more. I'll just keep working on it until I get it right. Normally I'd just do that without stopping the lathe, and I'm just a little bit more. So we're pretty good. Just a tiny little bit more. A little bit of sandpaper. This is just 180. .240. I'm not taking much off, I'm just giving a very light sand because I had the diameter pretty close. Good idea sometimes to make it a little bit, leave it a little bit larger. A little bit of 320. Yeah, finish off with a tiny bit of 400. Just a light sand. Okay, so next step now is to take it off. And once I get it to there, it's only a small spigot showing. what I want to do is I want to shear it off, and this is where one of those handmade, I could use a little saw to cut that off if I wanted to, but this is one where I've used a handmade parting tool. And there we have it. Now, the next, we have our little piece. And how do we cut our trench in here without breaking the whole thing? And that was the difficult part that I had to sort of overcome. So what I did was I built another block, and in the block I turned a hole in the bottom of it so I could fit the piece in, and then I'm going to run that over the router just to cut that trench in there. So as you can see, it took a fair bit. This is one I just made, and I probably need to take off a little bit more off the top of it so that it will fit in there, but I've got one that already fits, so we'll cut this one. Okay, so it's a little bit more work involved in getting that one right, but we've already got this one right, so I'll do that one.
Show us the bottom of that jig. Turn it over.
So it's just got a hole in it. It's got a hole in there that I use, and I'll explain that in a second. I'm going to go over and drill a hole in the bottom of the spigot, so that'll fit in there like that. So I think I have everything here I need. So over to the drill press. That's a 2.5mm drill bit that I've got on there. The reason I've got a 2.5mm drill bit is because I need to put something in there to actually hold the thing in place. So I've got a piece of welding wire that fits in like so, and then I can run that over the top of a router bit. Now the reason I've got that in there is because as soon as you hit this with the router bit, if you don't have anything holding it in place, I could have had a compression fit, but that still didn't work with the compression fit. The whole thing rotated, it spun, and that meant a fair bit of damage. So this was the easiest way that I could figure out how to cut that, quite simply on the router. Like I say, problem solving 101. So it took a fair bit of fiddling to get that. Okay, so the router bit that I used was just an 8mm router bit, and I did this in a number of different passes. So you can use any size router bit you like, a straight router bit. I would suggest that what you do is use one as small as possible, but not that small that it's going to break in the process, because it's going to take 2 or 3 passes to actually get it to work. So that's the height that it's going to end up. So I'm going to drop that down to a little bit, like so, and I'll do a couple of passes, but I will need a fence. This is where I'm going to have to turn the table so Pammy can film it for you.
Ozzy wants to know how many RPM is the lathe going when you actually turned that little head?
1300 RPMs. You can have it faster if you like, it's up to you. You know, it depends on the skill level that you have with your lathe. If you want to do it a little bit slower, by all means, set it to the speed that you find comfortable. So what I'm doing is I'm just adjusting that so that it's It's going to slide nicely through there. I need a clamp. Okay, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to feed that straight over the top of the router. Just remember, you've got the router bit stuck up there, so keep your fingers out of the way, and all I'm doing is holding my pin. I could make one that sticks a little bit harder in there, but I'm just holding the pin so that it will slide straight across like so. So ears on, everybody.
Turning table for me, please.
I beg your pardon?
You said you were going to turn the table for me.
Oh. That's so Pammy can see it.
Which means that everybody else can see
So
it.
that everybody else can see it. Okay. So now I have part of it done. What I have to do is now raise it up to the right height. I'm just going to test to see if that's going to fit. Is that the right one? Just have to readjust a tiny little bit. It's not quite fitting in there. So I need to take a little more off, which means I've just got to bring my fence in a tiny bit. Like I say, this wasn't just a simple process. This took a little bit of effort. Okay, let's try that again.
Actually, that's probably not a bad thing, adjusting the height and the width.
Yeah.
And just creeping up on it. Because it's very, very fragile, isn't it?
Yes. Okay. Now I just need to raise the router bit up. Might just put a little bit of tape on that. It's not going to work because I have to go up against the fence. So you're still thinking? Okay. Now to get that out of there, I did have a tool that pushed that out. And there's our little piece. Where's our... And we have a perfect fit. So that took a little bit of effort, there's a little bit of damage on the spigot, but that doesn't matter. It's going to be glued into the bottom of the box. But you do that twice. So just making and going through the process of building something like that, like I say, it took me 3 weeks to get it sorted so that I could actually get it done and have it done looking really, really nice.
How long did it take to make the actual block jig?
To make the block is 10 minutes work. It's just a matter of putting it on the lathe and drilling out your holes. It didn't take all that long at all. It's just a matter of making sure that the size of the holes were always correct.
And it was just the thinking it through part prior to that?
Yeah, so that was basically where it all went to. So that was the process that we went through to get these lovely little pieces fitted. And now it's just a matter of actually fitting that to the box itself. So the box lid is going to be like so. I've got it marked at 70mm from the ends, and that's where our proportioning it comes into play. Just making sure that where you do have it fitted to is going to, look quite nice on the box. Now I'm not going to fit it now because it's that's going to take me another half an hour before I've actually got it fitted exactly the way I want it done, and we've only got a couple of minutes left on the show, so we might end it there today. Just a couple of things. I'm going to fit that off camera and I'll show it to you next week. Next week what I want to do is I want to show you what I've done with the rest of the box, because I'll do a lot of it off camera, but I want to start with our mini jig sessions next week, so that people who are thinking of buying a mini jig to cut butterflies, the jig is not built, well, it's built for that purpose, but you can use it for many other things. So we're going to have a series of different boxes that we're going to make with the mini jig, and just to show you all of the functions that we can use on it. So if you have a space in your workshop where you don't have a lot of room for a large tool or a large jig or something like that, by all means this little mini jig will do quite a lot of it. So that will start next week, and I'll also show you where we're up to with the parts of these. It's just a matter of actually putting that in place and then putting it together. So that's all that is, and then put a coat of finish on it. And I'll talk about that before we start next week. Now, the other thing is there's Dave Stanton's actually due to start in 5 minutes. Apparently he's come back on, and
Good.
He will be doing, I think, cutting thin material with a track saw. Thin material, narrow boards, I think was what he said to me. So yeah, that should be interesting. So if you're struggling with your track saw and you're trying to get it sorted, yeah, log on to Dave in 5 minutes and see how you go from there.
Okay.
So that should be good. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed today. I know it wasn't traditional stuff. It was just something thinking through an issue that we come up with. And we made the problem ourselves by having the design features we wanted. But anyway, we've got there. So if you haven't subscribed already and you enjoyed today, please subscribe to the channel, give us a few thumbs up, and we'll see you all next week. So thanks for watching, and yeah, have a good week.